Thank you all for being patient during, my NFL offseason discussion. There's your Pear Deck link. If you guys, if you are astute and observational, you'll see that we were supposed to talk about equal rights today and the fight for equal rights. And I've changed it to, if you were looking at the Pear Deck modules, I'm sorry, just the Canvas modules. I changed it to Chicano rights today, which is what we were going to talk about on Monday. And we'll talk about equal rights on Monday now instead of today. And the only reason being is because this past week we talked about, Black Americans fighting for voting rights and civil rights. Then we talked about Native Americans yesterday. And Chicanos are Latinos. Hey, Larry. And Hispanic Americans. And I figured just kind of going with the theme and equal rights. This is going to be talking about women, LGBTQ plus, and Roe versus Wade, and just some pretty controversial stuff. And I felt like it was a gear shift away from what we were discussing all week, and just to kind of keep it fluid, I just switched it. And then that way also it gives us, because it's Friday, guys, this is a shorter lesson than this one. So, it gives us a nice, easy Friday, and then we can put more focus onto this one. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Everybody all right with that switch? Some of us are, we're very regimented and we like to schedule out. Some of us do. I just don't want to throw anybody off. Okay. All right. Again, one more time. There's that Pear Deck link. Let's get rolling. So today we're going to be talking about the Chicano rights movement. Okay. And this is going to be taking place in the 1960s and 1970s, like much of these other civil rights movements. But this one's going to be interesting because it's got roots in other civil rights movements that we've already talked about. This is kind of like, I don't want to call it background, as more as like.
Morning.
Good morning. This is like, we don't talk about it much here in Ohio. Okay, and what I found from teaching in Texas and teaching in Ohio is, and somebody mentioned the other day, something we talked about in class they didn't learn in Arkansas. You'll find when you learn U.S. history, it kind of varies by region. And in Texas, there's a large Hispanic population, and we talk a lot more about this than we do here. Yeah, Chris, it was you. That's right. We talk because of the Hispanic population in Texas. And it's a lot more relevant there. But I do have to be honest, guys, this is kind of a lesson that's a little near and dear to me because one of these organizations that one of my teaching partners was involved with. So I got a lot of like firsthand experience learning about some of this stuff and seeing some of this stuff with the Chicano rights movement, and some of this artwork here was painted in downtown San Antonio. So again, it's very familiar to me. Little passion project. So bear with me. I am a little biased. What's your stress level today, guys? It's Friday. I know some of us were like way over here yesterday. I really hope, we can bring it down, at least just with the fact that it's the weekend. You get a nice break, 2 days off. It's been a long week. I feel like this week has been 2 weeks. And I think it's just because, we came back from spring break, and it's just, we're just trying to get back into it. I think next week will go much smoother, much better. We got no pressure anymore, right? There's no state testing looming over us. All we have to do for the rest of the year is just hang out and talk about history. So that's the easy part. We are going to have an assessment next week. It's not a test. Okay, so but it is going to be a 2-day assignment, and I'll go over that. If we have time at the end, I'll go over it a little bit more, but we'll go over it. We're going to do a lot of it in class. One of the days it's going to be like a Wednesday discussion activity, but just keep that in mind. It will be worth a test grade, okay? But you're going to have a couple days to work on it. It's going to be in multiple parts, and it's going to be primary source analysis. All right, so let's look at this Chicano rights movement. There is strength and safety in numbers, okay, with anything, right? People in general, as when we look at our basic biology, we feel safe when and stronger when we have a lot of people around us, especially people who look like us, think like us, act like us, talk like us. And throughout history, as particularly U.S. history, minority ethnic groups have built strong networks to cultivate community and individual successes. Right? And this is going to be especially true in the Latin American community in the United States. Latin American citizens in the 19th and 20th centuries were marked with racism and roadblocks. And again, this is one we don't talk about often in U.S. history. We focus more on Black civil rights and groups like that, and we kind of push these guys to the side, and it's kind of just like a little snippet in the history books. But in response to this, we're going to see organizations rise up like the Order of the Sons of America, the Knights of America, and the League of Latin American Citizens, and they're going to pop up particularly around the Southwest: Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Colorado. Okay. Rose, take a deep breath, girl. You are working yourself too hard. I hear you there. I hear you there. All right, so let's talk about, this is supposed to say league. Apparently I rushed it and it says leave, and it's going to say leave throughout the whole thing. This is the League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC is how I'm going to call them. LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. And in 1929 in Corpus Christi, Texas, these groups are going to come together, these groups that we just talked about, Knights of America, League of Latin American Citizens, and Order of the Sons of America. They're going to come together and discuss incorporating themselves into one single organization. And they debated this for a year. And this convention produced the League of United Latin American Citizens, or the LULAC. And these guys are still around. And this league was formed to protect the welfare of the Latin American community. They're kind of, you can kind of relate them to the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancements of Colored Peoples. But the LULAC is like that, but for Hispanic Americans. They promoted the solidarity of Latin Americans within the dominant Anglo culture. Anglo means white, guys. But LULAC's primary order of business was establishing its members' patriotism. Okay, this is especially important in times of suspicion and discrimination against non-Anglos in the United States. As we've mentioned with the World War II unit, right, there's a lot of suspicion against Japanese Americans during the Red Scare, against European immigrants, particularly from Eastern Europe, and those coming from countries really in close proximity to communist Russia at the time. Non-white Americans suffered at the hands of this discrimination and suspicion throughout U.S. history, we know. And LULAC wanted to set Latin Americans aside from these suspicions by instilling patriotism into their people. Officers and members of LULAC had to swear an oath of loyalty to the U.S. government. They made America the Beautiful the official song of LULAC and declared English as the organization's official language. This group's also based its constitution on the U.S. Constitution. Okay, so these guys really believed in the idea of the American dream. However, these acts are not enough to overcome the racism and bigotry of the time. Critics question LULAC's usefulness and their loyalty. Nonetheless, its members continue to prove their patriotism as they work to improve conditions for Latin Americans in the United States. Since its early existence, LULAC's made education part of its central focus. They set up college scholarships for qualified high school students. And probably the biggest thing they've done is they created the Little School of the 400 in the 1950s. And its aim was to ensure Latin American preschool children entered public school knowing 400 English words. And this is a precursor to the current Head Start program. And in addition, LULAC created National Education Service Centers. And again, like I said, I'm really biased in this lesson. I taught a lot of students in Texas who were new to the country, who spoke zero English or only knew just a few basic phrases. And, you know, they would plop these kids down into classrooms that were 100% English speaking, and, you know, they were held to the exact same standards as everyone else. So when I started learning about, you know, education in Texas and history of that and some of these groups and learning about these programs, like that was really inspiring to me to try to make myself a better teacher for those kinds of students. So like I said, guys, really biased on this topic. LULAC advocated for a national mandate to redistribute public educational funds to poor schools. This is big. This was a big argument, and it's still an argument today. If you're not aware, public schools are funded through property taxes. Okay, so every time, like when you're driving around your town, your neighborhood, or wherever you live around election time, and you'll see like, vote yes on Prop 5 or vote no on tax levy here. Schools, that's how schools make their money. Schools are funded through your property taxes on your house, right? They get a percentage of the tax. Those levies either raise or lower the tax, right? So historically, and it's set up this way, schools in poorer areas are less funded because the property taxes are in poorer areas are lower. Make sense? So those who need the money the most usually get the least because of where they're located. And LULAC is one of the first groups to advocate for redistributing those funds from the richer neighborhoods to the poorer neighborhoods to help improve those schools. It's called the Robin Hood, or the Robin Hood method, right? You take from the rich and give to the poor. But many of these schools that they were advocating for had a majority of Latin American students. Again, the school that I taught at previously was 98% Hispanic. It was in a very poor area as well. Through this fund, LULAC helped to integrate many school districts in Texas and throughout the American Southwest. Fun fact, San Antonio, where I used to live, is still one of the most segregated cities in America. And it was redlined originally. It was redlined to be that way, and then after integration, after segregation ended, just based on like cultural ties to the neighborhoods, it stayed that way. LULAC worked not only to integrate schools for Latin Americans, but also to help minority students gain better education overall. This group, the League of United Latin American Citizens, still continues to be one of the largest and most important civil rights organizations for Latin American communities in the U.S. They're still around, and they're still doing this work. They secured many political and social rights for Latin America, specifically for those of Mexican descent. And from the early struggles of equality to the current turmoil over immigration, LULAC exemplifies the spirit of democracy through civic involvement and engagement with the government. Okay, so how do we feel about the League of United Latin American Citizens in this group? Again, the main points are they fought for civil rights for Latin Americans. The main purpose was to instill patriotism and integrate Latin Americans into American society and establish strong educational ties. Okay, and the idea behind that is, again, in my experience, many of these people they come to this country to give their children a better life. They go through struggles and who knows what to get here to give their children a better life. So education in that community is held to such a high standard, especially with these first generation immigrants. And this school of 400, learning English and things like that, it's just held in such high regard. It's inspiring. At least, that's my opinion on it. All right. Let's look at this court case, Mendez versus Westminster, because this one's going to be particularly interesting for what a lesson we did a few days ago. In 1946, parents of Mexican and Mexican-American students legally challenged school segregation in Orange County, California. 5 Mexican-American fathers, including Gonzalo Mendez, led the charge to allow their children to attend the best schools possible, which at the time were only open to white students. Thurgood Marshall, we should recognize that name, of the NAACP, he came to California and helped to argue these cases. The judge in the U.S. District Court, Paul McCormick, ruled in favor of the parents. The school district appealed. So the state or the U.S. District Court said that, yeah, you can go to these schools. In 1947, the school districts appealed. So it goes to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is just under the Supreme Court, and they held up the lower court's ruling and struck down school segregation in California, which had previously been justified under the separate but equal ruling in Plessy versus Ferguson. See where we're going here, guys? Then Governor Earl Warren, California's governor at the time, desegregated all of California's schools. This trial is going to be used as a precursor to Brown versus Board of Education. Remember we talked about that just a few days ago, where they wanted to send the little girl to the white school down the street instead of across town to the black school, and segregation was deemed unconstitutional. So this Mendez versus Westminster, this is going to be the foundation, if you will. It's going to be the studs before they put up the walls on the house. This is going to be what they use to argue Brown versus Board of Education and end segregation nationwide. Mendez versus Westminster is going to end segregation in California. And it's going to be upheld on the federal level, which is what's going to give the teeth to Brown versus Board of Education and that rule. Does it make sense to everybody? Well, I'll ask you that in a minute. In that case, Thurgood Marshall referenced, and in Brown versus Education, again, Thurgood Marshall argued the case and referenced the Mendez versus Westminster case, that school segregation was unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment. Newly appointed Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren agreed in the landmark ruling for educational opportunity. Does that name sound familiar? Earl Warren? It should, because when Mendez versus Westminster was argued, he was the governor of California. He's the governor of California that desegregates all California schools. Then he gets nominated to the Supreme Court, and then he's on the court when Brown versus Board of Education is argued. It all comes together, guys. It's like making a cake. History is like a cake. You throw in the eggs, you throw in the flour, you stir it all together. It all incorporates. It all builds off one another. And then in 1967, Thurgood Marshall will become the first African-American Supreme Court justice as well, which I believe we've discussed. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions about Westminster versus Mendez? Again, just a little throwback to our discussion on Brown versus Board of Education and just kind of the steps it takes, right? I hope we understand that cases that are argued in the Supreme Court, they don't just go there, right? It's a long process to get to that. Oh, that's awesome, Ben. Did you do anything on Westminster versus Mendez in that report? Oh, that's awesome. That's good to hear. All right, seems like most of us have it. So let's talk about Cesar Chavez and the Chicano rights movement. So at the beginning of the 20th century, so the beginning of the 1900s, Mexican farm workers in California unionized to fight against the agriculture industry, right? Just like all the other industries we talked about, using labor unions to get better rights, better pay, safer working conditions. Farm workers in California, which, by the way, guys, if you weren't aware, California is the largest agricultural producing state in the United States, right? They grow all our food, all the strawberries, all the apples, all the blueberry, right? Look at the little sticker next time you're at the grocery store. It'll tell you where your fruit came from, or your vegetables, and a lot of it comes from California. So those farm workers unionized. And although they won some concessions, their battle was just beginning. In the 1960s, during the civil rights movement, a civil rights movement for Chicanos gained momentum through California, the Pacific Coast, and the Southwest. Young Mexican Americans had embraced this term Chicano, which was previously thought of as derogatory. Really, guys, all it means is like you're a Mexican born in the United States. That's my best understanding of it. You're like full heritage Mexican, Hispanic, but you're born within the United States, and particularly in California, and that's a Chicano. They joined with the United Farm Workers in California, led by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, and other groups such as the United Farm Workers Co-op in Washington and La Raza Unida Party in Texas. They formed to expand the fights for migrant workers' rights. And Ohio's a big farm country. We get a lot of migrant workers here in the summer, particularly like in the Hartville area, and these guys were fighting for those workers. In 1965, Chavez joined with mostly Filipino farm workers unions to strike for better pay. In addition, he organized a large boycott of table grapes in the United States. He said, don't buy these grapes because they're picked by migrant workers who aren't being paid very well, who are being treated very poorly. And he even participated in a hunger strike to uphold the nonviolent tactics of the movement. And this is something he picked up from learning about Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. And he ended up losing 35 pounds in 25 days. But what's most important is that grape boycott succeeded. The point of it worked. And farm workers were able to secure better pay and better benefits as a result. Strikes and boycotts in the 60s led to California passing the Agricultural Labor Relations Act. And this act guaranteed the right of farm workers to organize and unionize. RUP members in Texas focused on winning political offices in Texas, including the race for governor. And while they didn't win, they continued to bring the issues of the Chicano movement to the mainstream in the 1970s. Okay. So, all I want for you today is try to connect something interesting you learned today to something in your own life. Can you relate? And it doesn't have to be directly, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be today. It could be from another lesson. Just connect something to today. And I hope you picked up on the theme of just the civil rights movement of people just want equality and acceptance, right? They just want to feel safe and secure where they go. They want to be treated the same. They want to have the same opportunities. And that's all this story of the civil rights movement is about, is that fight for equality and acceptance. Okay. Let me throw that on to student paste for you. You have workbook 4.7 today, Chicano Rights Movement. And then I want to look at, real quick, just because we have about 2 minutes, this assessment. I don't think I have this loaded up yet. I don't, because I'm still working on it. But we're going to be analyzing Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail. Remember, we talked about the Selma marches and the freedom rides and that, and Martin Luther King gets arrested and thrown in jail in Birmingham. He writes a number of letters to different clergymen around the country, and we're going to be looking at those letters. Now, I will warn you, the letter that I have it's an abridged letter, meaning it's summarized. Most of it's there. But still, even with it being abridged, it's about 5 pages of letter writing. The unabridged, the full version, is about 25 pages. And I don't want to make us read that. And it's just a lot to read. I am going through and I'm highlighting it for you. So it will be pre-highlighted with all of the important stuff. And we're going to be working through a primary source analysis document. I'm also going to be providing a Spotify link for there's a reading of it. Martin Luther, I found on Spotify, Martin Luther King reading the letter. So you'll be able to listen to that. That's longer than what the letter is because it's the full letter. So, okay. But again, we'll go over that more next week. We're going to work on it together in class on Thursday. All right. Don't forget target sessions at 12:30 and 2:30. Have a great weekend, guys. Be safe. Enjoy the weather when it's nice. I'll see y'all on Monday. Okay. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, if you need any help, if you don't know where to start. Rose, I look forward to your inspirational messages every day. Love it. Keep it up. Don't work too hard tonight, Rose. And have a good weekend. We'll see y'all, guys. Bye now.
My rifle barrel just got here.
Oh,
my
boy.
black powder rifle. It just arrived.